Last week, a 24-year-old Aboriginal man died after being restrained by police officers in a supermarket in the remote town of Alice Springs in Australia's Northern Territory. Before I delve into the details of his death and my undoubtedly controversial opinion, I'd just like to highlight that the national broadcaster, the ABC, has completely spammed the airwaves with this news. Man dies in custody after supermarket altercation. Alice Spring man dies in custody. Death in custody in Alice Springs. Pathologist finds cause of death in custody of 24-year-old Yuendumu man undetermined. Grandfather of 24-year-old Yuendumu man who died in police custody pays tribute and calls for justice. Senior leader says Alice Springs at breaking point after Walpiri man's death in custody. Demands for answers after 9th First Nations person dies in custody this year. Family of Indigenous man who died in police custody demand CCTV. A tragic day, outpouring of grief in Alice Springs after death in custody. NT police rule out independent investigation into Kumanjayi White's death in custody. NT police reject call for independent investigation. Reconciliation Week feels particularly hollow after another death in custody. After another Yuendumu death in custody, Australia must confront some harsh truths. I'm sure I've missed some, but one may think there is no other news in Australia. So what happened? According to this article, the police allege that the man was placing items down the front of his clothing when he was confronted by security guards. One of the security guards was assaulted, and there were 2 police officers who were in plain clothes at the time in the supermarket who rendered assistance to the security guards. The male behaved rather aggressively and was placed onto the ground by those police officers. He was later identified as losing consciousness. A short time later, the man stopped breathing and CPR was commenced. St John Ambulance attended the scene and the man was conveyed to Alice Springs Hospital, where he was pronounced deceased shortly after. Later articles revealed that the man had a disability, though the specific nature of his condition was never defined. Despite this, references to his disability appeared in every single report from that point forward. Additionally, his real name is not Kumanjayi White. Kumanjayi is essentially a placeholder name, which is a Western desert name for somebody who has died. It should be noted that Mr. White had faced court on charges of aggravated assault and assaulting police as recently as this year, which were ultimately withdrawn due to his disability. He had previously spent time on remand over charges related to dangerous driving and a police pursuit. He was certainly no Boy Scout. Assistant Police Commissioner Travis Wurst stated that police had gathered a substantial amount of evidence, including footage from CCTV cameras and body-worn cameras. According to authorities, the events unfolded as described, leaving little room for dispute over what occurred. The ABC published images of a ceremony in which elders swept the supermarket floors with gum leaves, while some participants wailed in sorrow. Of course, the ABC quickly allowed this to become racialised. In this article, they reported that a witness saw a big white man grabbing an Aboriginal man in some sort of hold. I'm not sure what it was, but it looked pretty violent, and then they slammed him to the ground, the witness said. Another eyewitness said they saw the man being pursued by a security guard. The ABC also published images of Black Lives Matter protesters from 5 years ago in Canberra. They now have a dedicated news category titled Black Deaths in Custody. I wonder if they have a White Deaths in Custody category. I think we all know the answer to that. The network also interviewed the grandfather of the deceased, Ned Hargraves, who referenced Black Lives Matter, stating, "This happened on the 5th anniversary of the death of George Floyd during Reconciliation Week, but my people have to confront another death in custody. My people are going into jail at record numbers, men, women and children alike." Okay, so I think we all understand the ABC's stance on the matter. It's about bringing a sense of justice to Mr. White, whom they portray as a victim at the hands of the police. However, there are a few things the ABC is not saying, and I suppose it's my job to say them, noting that I made similar points about George Floyd and Black Lives Matter in the past, which quickly led to a couple of my videos being removed and YouTube issuing me a 1-week ban. So from now on, I'll speak directly, but carefully. The first point I'd like to make is about personal accountability. Mr. White did, in fact, attempt to steal from the shop and assaulted a security guard, actions we know happened and which are presumably caught on camera. The obvious conclusion is that if he hadn't tried to steal, he wouldn't have died. That's not speculation, it's almost certainly true. Now, I'm not suggesting that theft should ever justify a person's death. Of course not. However, shop owners also have the right to prevent theft, including employing security guards to protect their business. It is a factual statement that Mr. White's actions initiated the chain of events that led to his death. And to my knowledge, not one person in the media is acknowledging this. Yes, the outcome was unfortunate, but placing sole blame on the police or historical injustices is wrong. Secondly, the media keeps highlighting that Mr. White had a disability. However, they didn't specify the nature of his condition, whether it was an intellectual disability or a physical impairment like requiring a cane. Regardless of the details, one thing is undeniable. He knew what he was doing was wrong. How do we know that? Because he hid the stolen goods down the front of his pants. No one would do that unless they understood they were committing theft. If he had an intellectual disability that prevented him from comprehending the laws of the land, he surely would have simply walked in, grabbed the items, and walked out. But a person who conceals stolen goods in his pants is a person who knows he is doing something wrong. Thirdly, where was the community? If Mr. White truly had a life-altering disability, why was he wandering around a shop alone? If his condition meant he was prone to breaking the law, surely he should have been supervised at all times. Where was the support? I have a family member with an intellectual disability who requires 24-hour care. He would never be allowed to wander a supermarket alone, as it could put him or someone else in danger. According to the ABC, Mr. White was on the NDIS, the Australian government program that provides funding and support for people with significant and permanent disabilities. They wrote, First Nations people with disability experience intersectional discrimination based on race and ableism, and too often they are treated as criminals when they should be supported. I'm sorry, but if someone is stealing from a shop, unless they have an obvious intellectual impairment and then attacks a security guard, what else could the security and police have done? He was a violent offender, and his disability was being used as a crutch. Look, I'm not here to blame the victim, but doesn't the word victim imply innocence? Mr. White was stealing goods, attacked the security guard who approached him, and then resisted arrest when police arrived. No, he shouldn't be dead, and that is truly unfortunate. But a disabled man on the NDIS shouldn't be wandering around Coles alone, stealing goods and taking a swing at a security guard who was simply doing his job.